This is section 1.2 and this is video 1. We're talking about the basics of functions and their graphs. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is some definitions. The first definition we need is a relation. Now, a relation is just any set of ordered pairs. In order for a relation to be a function, for every x value, there can only be one y value. So every input can only have one output. Just a reminder about the word domain. Domain is going to be all your possible x values, and range is going to be your possible y values. So let's take a look at some examples. Here's our first set of examples. Now for each of these, we're going to find the domain and range and then decide if the relation is a function. So you can see here I've listed 3 relations. We're going to find the domain and range for each and then decide if they're functions. Looking at this first one, we'll start with the domain. Remember, domain is going to be your possible x values. And if I look, I see the x values of 1, 2, and 3. So we'll go ahead and list those out. And we like to list them from smallest to largest. So we'll use our little brackets, 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll do the same for the range, only for the range we're going to look at the y values. Now our y values in this case are 8, 9, and 10. So we'll just list those out again from smallest to largest. And that would be our range. Now to determine if this is a function, we need to look at our x's and decide for every x, does it only have one y? And it looks like that is the case. Each of these x's, 1, 2, and 3, correspond to only one y value, 8, 9, and 10. So yes, in this case, it is a function. This relation is a function. Let's take a look at the next one. Now in this case, our domain is the possible x values, and I see one x value each time, and that x value is 2. So we only list it once. Because it's repeated, we just have to list it one time. Now in terms of the range, our possible y values, we have 3, 4, and 5, so we'll list all 3 of those. Now in this case, again, when deciding if this is a function or not, we have to look at every x and see how many y values it has. Now, the x value 2 has 3 different y values. Since that x has more than one y, we're going to say this is not a function. What I'd like you to do right now is pause your video, and I want you to try this last one on your own, and then you can go ahead and play your video and check it. Alright, hopefully you decided that this one is a function. The reason is that there are 3 different x values. Each of them has the same y value, but they each only have one y value. So we're safe, it is a function. For every x, there's only one y. Let's go ahead and move on. Now I'm going to give you a multiple choice question here for you to do on your Google form. So go ahead, pause your video, answer this question, and put the answer into your Google form for the multiple choice, and then go on to the next slide. Now that we know how to decide if a relation is a function, we're going to decide if an equation is a function or not. So in order to do that, if we want to decide if an equation is a function, there's a few things we have to do. The first thing we're going to do is start with our equation, and the very first step is we'll solve for y. We'll get the y by itself. So that's the first step. So let's look at this first one. X plus 4y equals 8. Let's get the y alone. So let's subtract an x from both sides. So we get 4y equals negative x plus 8. And then divide by 4. So we get y equals negative x plus 8/4. Now, in this case here, if I'm trying to decide, now I need to decide if it's a function. Remember, if it's a function, for every x, there's only one y. So now here's where we just have to do a little bit of thinking. When I put values in for x, no matter any value I put in for x, I'm always only going to get one answer because I'm going to take the opposite of that, add 8, and divide by 4. I'm always going to get one answer. Since I'm always going to get one answer, that means yes, it is a function. So once we solve for y, then we have to decide. And we have to just think about if I put an x in, what's going to happen. So now let's take a look at the next one. Same idea. Let's get the y by itself. So let's subtract the x squared from both sides. And we have 2y equals negative x squared plus 10. And then divide by 2. So we get y equals negative x squared plus 10 divided by 2. And now we have to decide. So as I put numbers in for x, I'm going to square them. I'm going to take the opposite and then square them and add 10 and divide by 2. Now every time I do this, once again, I'm only going to get one solution. Every x value will only give me one y value. So in this case, once again, it is a function. But let's look at our last example here. So far it looks like it's always a function. So let's take a look at this last one. Remember the steps tell us to solve for y. So I'm going to start by, again, subtracting the x squared. So I get negative x squared plus 16. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now remember, when you square root a variable that's being squared, your answer becomes plus or minus the solution. So we're going to get plus or minus the square root of negative x squared plus 16. Now in this case, when I plug y's in and I take the opposite square, I'm going to add 16 and take the square root. All those things I have to do. I'm going to end up with two possibilities, the positive of that and the negative of that. Since it's going to give me two different possibilities, we have to say that this is not a function. So there's a case where it's not a function. All right. This is where we're going to end our video for today. You have your free response question here for your Google form. Now notice that you have two parts to answer, so you can just say, for each of those, you can just list your answers in order on the Google form, and then that's where we'll be ending our video for today.